Doing great. Good morning, everyone. I think we're going to start today's webinar. Thank you so much for being here. Um, in the chat, you should have access to a agenda, today's agenda in English and Spanish. And I'll be opening the webinar with some opening remarks, and then we'll move to our country and technical presentations. And then we'll have a brief panel discussion, some space for question and answers, and our closing remarks. So with that, I'll start. It's my distinct pleasure to open and moderate today's webinar, Accounting for People, Nature, and the Economy, the Ocean Accounts Framework, with the partner Global Ocean Accounts Partnership, or GOAP. We are all here because we recognize the importance of our countries and our region's marine environments to our social, economic, and environmental well-being. This region is famous for many ocean-based assets, from the world's second largest barrier reef, one of the global economy's most important canals, and its network of associated sea and logistic ports, to the plethora of tourism assets, from resorts to critical fishery stocks of lobster, conch, shrimp, and beyond, to the marine protected areas, mangroves, reefs, and seagrass beds that people use their life savings to visit. From these assets, we derive an incredible amount of utility. We receive dollars and cents that flow into our central banks. We receive awe and wonder from the visits and images of megafauna such as sperm whales that we see in Dominica. And we receive health benefits from the marine genetic resources and morning ocean swims that many an octogenarian claim are a key part of their long life in the Caribbean. However, without tangibly measuring and incorporating these values, the values derived from this utility into our decision making, we make poorer strategic decisions about manage these natural capital assets and the flow of benefits that we would derive from them. Ocean accounts are one of the most powerful ways to incorporate natural capital and the value of the flow of ecosystem services into our ocean decision making processes. For this reason, we are happy to have assembled a wide range of stakeholders involved in ocean accounts, from countries of varying levels of implementation to specialist partnerships like GOAP, who help countries advance this work, to development banks that recognize the power of this tool and how it supports their investments. This work is what the Ocean Coordination Mechanism is about. Created through over a decade of work from the region and funded by the Global Environmental Facilities International Waters funding line, this project and this work is built on the recognition that fragmentation of efforts and non-ecosystem based management were one of the most significant threats to ocean governance in the wider Caribbean region. The OCM was formally operationalized in 2025, and this wider Caribbean Ocean Coordination Mechanism provides a permanent, inclusive structure for aligning action, sharing knowledge, and optimizing the use of limited resources by enhancing coordination and collaboration across the Caribbean and northern Brazil shelf large meat ecosystem. So as I said, we're really promoting ecosystem-based management here, not just based on political, language, or cultural boundaries. We count 21 countries and 9 NGOs of the wider Caribbean as our membership, and we aspire to have full membership of all eligible states and territories as soon as possible. With this webinar series, we recognize that on the road to our ocean conference and beyond, there was a need to coordinate wider Caribbean voices on a variety of topics. Our first webinar on the Global Biodiversity Framework's 30 by 30 goal articulated how countries are working to advance marine-based preservation of our assets. Our second webinar last week presented sustainable ocean plans, which are an essential tool for the sustainable management of our entire ocean space. And now today, we move to ocean accounts, which are also a key step of sustainable ocean plans, but also one of the most important ways we can measure for better management. So with these opening remarks, it's going to be my distinct pleasure to introduce your speakers today. And today we start with a presentation from the government of Costa Rica, which is working significantly to advance ocean accounts. So with that, I would like to hand over to Carlos Cordera Vega, who is the Director of the Sectoral Planning Secretariat for Environment and Energy in the Ministry of Environment and Energy, the Government of Costa Rica. He's going to explain a bit of the work that they're doing, but also the pledge to advance ocean accounts by 2020-30, and the work the Costa Rican government is doing in this space. Before I hand over to him, the idea behind this webinar series is that we're raising ambitions on the road to our Oceans Conference. So please pay attention if you believe that your country may be interested in ocean accounts and may be able to announce some sort of pledge or commitment to advance ocean accounts at the upcoming conference. Of course, this conference is not the only stepping stone. We're looking beyond our ocean to the next UNOC and the next our ocean beyond that. So we hope by the next conference, we are able not only to announce new commitments, but announce progress of countries which have advanced ocean accounts in the interim period. So with that, I thank you. I would remind you that if you would like language interpretation, please click on more and select your preferred language. Si tú quieres interpretación en español, haga un clic donde dice más y seleccionar su idioma preferido. Thank you so much. And Carlos, I'm going to hand it now over to you. Cheers.
Gracias, Alexander. Gracias por la presentación. Gracias también por el espacio para mostrar un poco del trabajo que está haciendo Costa Rica en este importante tema que, adelantándolo, yo siempre describo las cuentas ambientales. Ahora vamos a hablar una específica que tiene una meta Costa Rica, que es la cuenta del océano. Pero Costa Rica ya tiene un contexto, un recorrido en tema de cuentas ambientales. Y si me pidiesen describir las cuentas ambientales en una frase rápida y en una que en esta frase pudiésemos determinar también el por qué y para qué, no solo a nivel técnico que lo vamos a ver, me gustaría iniciar la presentación diciendo que las cuentas ambientales, bajo mi punto de vista, son la materia prima para crear política pública basada en evidencia técnica. Ese es el porqué y el para qué de las cuentas ambientales. Es muy importante tener cuentas de nuestro ambiente para poder visibilizarlas dentro del modelo de desarrollo económico de nuestros países. Entonces, con esta introducción voy a compartir y por favor me corroboran si están viendo mi presentación.
Sí.
¿Sí la están viendo?
Sí. Y está
Perfecto.
en presentación mode.
Perfecto. Esta presentación también, bueno, es un poco del trabajo que hacemos como Consejo Nacional de Cuentas Ambientales. También una muestra de cómo Costa Rica ha llevado al alto nivel este tema de las cuentas ambientales. Esta presentación está hecha por mi persona y también por Silvia Arguedas, coordinadora del área de estadísticas ambientales del Banco Central de Costa Rica. Lo primero que me gusta explicar sobre cuentas ambientales en Costa Rica es que para lograr que las cuentas ambientales sean verdaderamente aplicadas y no solamente un ejercicio técnico, se necesita tener gobernanza. Entonces, hicimos un decreto ejecutivo, que ahí viene el número, es el 41125, lo pueden buscar con ese nombre, así como está ahí descrito en el subtítulo de esta diapositiva. Y describe cuál es la gobernanza de las cuentas ambientales en Costa Rica. ¿Por qué este tema es tan importante y por qué lo inicio con esto? Porque las cuentas ambientales tienen muchos actores diferentes en donde ninguno es el jefe de ninguno. Entonces ustedes saben que cuando ninguno es el jefe de ninguno, puede o funcionar muy bien o puede o funcionar muy mal. Entonces nosotros decidimos hacerlo en un decreto ejecutivo en el que el Ministerio de Ambiente y Energía es quien preside el Consejo Nacional de Cuentas Ambientales, pero no es el jefe de los demás. Se logran acuerdos, o sea, el Consejo funciona con acuerdos, es decir, todos los miembros votan y la mayoría, o sea, la mitad más uno, es un voto positivo. Entonces, así es como se logran las decisiones a alto nivel de cuentas ambientales. Yo tengo el honor de presidir este Consejo Nacional de Cuentas Ambientales en representación del MINAE, pero también está el Ministerio de Hacienda, el Ministerio de Planificación Nacional y Política Económica, el Banco Central de Costa Rica, el Instituto Nacional de Estadística y Censo y otros ministerios y áreas que dependiendo del tipo de cuenta ambiental invitamos. Por ejemplo, en este momento tenemos al Sistema Nacional de Áreas de Conservación de Costa Rica y al Centro Nacional de Información Geoambiental del Ministerio de Ambiente y Energía también. Esta es una cosa que me gusta explicar de la importancia de los principios de coordinación con los que trabaja el Consejo Nacional de Cuentas Ambientales. Al no ser jefe ninguno, entonces la ley nos permite actuar con el principio de coordinación. No es un principio de ordenación de actos, pero sí es un principio de coordinación que en conjunto con el Consejo nos permite tomar decisiones en acuerdo por votación de mayoría. Y las funciones del Consejo Nacional de Cuentas Ambientales, en su artículo 3 del decreto anteriormente descrito, las voy a decir rápidamente, son apoyar la generación de insumos técnicos para la construcción de las cuentas, asistir al Ministerio de Ambiente y Energía en el seguimiento técnico de estas cuentas, impulsar la armonización de información entre las instituciones públicas y privadas para poder generar las cuentas, porque ya se imaginarán que el tema de la información otro universo que podemos hablar muy puntualmente en otra presentación, pero es muy importante porque se tienen que establecer estándares en donde la información generada por diferentes instituciones pueda ser comparable y formar comisiones de trabajo específicas de acuerdo a los temas específicos de las cuentas, porque existen diferentes tipos de cuentas ambientales. Y por supuesto que también toda la política pública existente gira en torno también hacia las cuentas ambientales. La política pública es una generadora de información para cuentas ambientales, pero también en el ciclo de formulación, seguimiento, monitoreo y evaluación de política pública. Ese es un ciclo constante. La política pública no es que se hace y está escrita en piedra y no se hace más. Es un círculo en el que hay que revisar los resultados de esa política pública para volver a formular nueva política pública. Entonces, las cuentas ambientales son materia prima para formular nueva, pero también el desarrollo de las mismas o la ejecución de las mismas políticas públicas generan información que retroalimentan las cuentas ambientales. Y las cuentas ambientales tienen un sistema de contabilidad ambiental y económica, que es un sistema internacional utilizado para hacer el cálculo estadístico y es un marco conceptual multipropósito que describe las interacciones entre la economía y el ambiente, así como el stock de activos ambientales y sus variaciones. Este sistema aplica los conceptos contables, estructuras, reglas y principios del Sistema Nacional de Cuentas Ambientales. Y acá hay varios documentos, tiene un enfoque modular, ¿verdad? Por cada uno de los temas en los que se pueda calcular cuentas ambientales. Esto lo hace el Departamento de Estadísticas Ambientales del Banco Central de Costa Rica con información de otras instituciones. Y en Costa Rica iniciamos las cuentas ambientales en 2012 y ya vamos por 2025, entonces hay 2026 ya, hay un recorrido de varios años de cálculo de cuentas. Actualmente tenemos calculada la cuenta de energía, la cuenta de agua, la cuenta de flujo de materiales, la cuenta de bosque y gasto en protección ambiental del sector privado en términos monetarios. Y actualmente estamos haciendo ejercicios contables en bioeconomía, servicios ecosistémicos y también nuestra meta 2030, que es tener la primera cuenta integrada del océano. Las cuentas también tienen una metodología que utiliza el estudio para calcular las emisiones de CO2 asociadas al comercio internacional y a la demanda final, utilizando modelos insumo-producto entre países. Y hablando específicamente de nuestra principal meta ahora 2030 con la cuenta del océano, que la hemos llamado cuenta de recursos marinos y costeros. Este nombre es muy importante explicarles por qué no solo estamos diciendo cuenta del océano, sino cuenta de recursos marinos y costeros. Y es que cuando iniciamos y decíamos la cuenta del océano, la gente con la que trabajamos, porque para construir las cuentas tenemos que trabajar con políticos, tenemos que trabajar con técnicos, tenemos que trabajar con sector privado, academia, público. Mucha gente se imaginaba que era una sola cuenta. Es curioso cómo cuando hablamos del continente y hablamos de cuentas ambientales, sí nos imaginamos que pueden ser diferentes cuentas, por ejemplo, energía, bosque, agua, otras. Pero cuando hablamos del océano, eh, muchas personas tendían a pensar que era una cuenta del océano. Y nos decían, ¿cuándo van a? Entonces a 2030, hasta 2030 van a tener la cuenta del océano. ¿Por qué tanto tiempo? Bueno, entonces le cambiamos el nombre a recursos marinos y costeros para que se pueda visibilizar mejor la magnitud de lo que significa tener una cuenta del océano. Cuando hablamos de cuenta del océano, hablamos de todas las interacciones socioeconómicas y ambientales que suceden en el océano, pero también en la línea costera. Entonces ya se imaginarán que hay muchísimas interacciones de turismo, de actividades de pesca, de biodiversidad, de humedales y manglares, entre otros. Entonces son muchas cuentas. Ya para la elaboración de estas cuentas hemos tenido capacitaciones en el país. Tenemos un memorándum de entendimiento con la GOAP, que voy a decirlo en inglés, es la Global Ocean Partnership Account Partnership para calcular cuentas ambientales alrededor del mundo, y ellos son los que nos están dando asesoría técnica para metodológica y también ayudando a conseguir algunos recursos para poder capacitar a las personas, adoptar estándares estadísticos, aprender de otros países que ya han hecho ejercicios, por ejemplo Ecuador, algunas islas también ya han hecho ejercicios, Indonesia, otros países también continentales y también de archipiélagos. Los países que más se han interesado tienen mucha costa, evidentemente, pero nos llama la atención que son países con muchas islas o completamente islas. Ya para ir finalizando, en 2024 hicimos un evento internacional en Costa Rica que se llamaba Inmersos en el Cambio, y ahí Costa Rica comenzó a tener liderazgo en el tema de océanos, pero en agosto de 2024 hicimos un taller nacional para tener una capacitación de cómo hacer una cuenta de manglares, para iniciar un piloto en manglares. Y luego, en marzo de 2025, firmamos este memorándum de entendimiento y un pledge, un compromiso internacional de Costa Rica junto con otros países y organizaciones para generar cuentas del océano. Y en junio de 2025, en la Conferencia Global del Océano, la número 3, en Niza, Francia, Costa Rica firma este pledge y también lidera la firma de este pledge con otros países. Y en 2026 ya tenemos una hoja de ruta sobre la cuenta del océano. Acá es un resumen de la cuenta con la que estamos iniciando, que tiene un enfoque inicial en manglares y arrecifes coralinos, pero también tiene un enfoque en la cuenta social, es decir, cuáles son las actividades socioeconómicas, las poblaciones y actividades socioeconómicas que se benefician o perjudican de el estado, condición y extensión de los recursos marinos y costeros en nuestro país. Y me gustaría terminar esta presentación con una lectura rápida de la declaración conjunta, el pledge, sobre el compromiso para avanzar las cuentas oceánicos hacia 2030. Ya tenemos alrededor de 20 países y organizaciones que han firmado este pledge, que inició en la firma y su lanzamiento en la Conferencia Mundial del Océano número 3 en Niza, Francia, el año pasado, y dice así: Reconocemos que la salud de nuestro océano es la salud de nuestras personas y de nuestras economías. El desarrollo sostenible de la economía oceánica requiere sistemas de información integrales que orienten la gestión sostenible y la toma de decisiones informadas. Nosotros, los firmantes de este pledge, nos comprometemos a impulsar las cuentas oceánicas para el desarrollo sostenible del océano hacia 2030 e invitamos a todas las naciones a unirse a este esfuerzo crucial, avanzando en las cuentas oceánicas en línea con sus propias prioridades nacionales. Reconocemos la importancia de las cuentas oceánicas para abordar los desafíos globales, reconociendo que el océano proporciona servicios ecosistémicos clave, sustenta numerosos medios de vida y desempeña un papel significativo en la regulación del clima. Las cuentas oceánicas integran datos e información sobre factores ambientales, económicos y sociales para fortalecer la gobernanza del océano y representan una oportunidad para alcanzar el desarrollo sostenible y la prosperidad en las zonas costeras. Dentro de los compromisos son impulsar las cuentas oceánicas hacia 2030, considerar los datos de las cuentas oceánicas en los procesos de toma de decisiones, apoyar los esfuerzos que fortalezcan las capacidades y promuevan el intercambio de conocimiento para mejorar las capacidades globales en contabilidad oceánica, así como invitamos a todas las naciones a sumarse a este esfuerzo para desarrollar e implementar cuentas oceánicas hacia 2030, creando una base sólida para la toma de decisiones informadas y la gestión sostenible del océano. Y con esto termino mi presentación y extiendo la invitación a quienes quieran unirse también. Me pueden contactar para hablar sobre la firma del pledge y sus implicaciones y demás con muchísimo más detalle de manera personal. Muchas gracias.
Carlos, muchísimas gracias for that presentation. It was really nice how you took us from how you started the governance all the way to the implementation of the accounts and the pledge. I think what was really rich for us is that the governance structure in and of itself is a nice outcome because you're bringing people together who may not normally come together to speak about these topics. It's also interesting that you said that this tool is useful for all stages of the policy cycle. It's input into policy creation, but it's also feedback in terms of how policy is working. So it's nice to see that it helps us from formulation to monitoring. It was also super exciting to see that you were able to go from capacity building to pilot accounts, pilot mangrove accounts so quickly. And then as well to hear about this announcement at UNOC, but that this is continuing. You know, you would like more people to join this pledge. Hopefully we see some interest between now and our ocean and maybe some pledges at our ocean. And it's our pleasure at the OCM to help facilitate raising the ambitions in the region on this. So Carlos, thank you so much for that presentation. And hopefully from learning from Costa Rica's experience, we have more countries joining on. Great. So from Carlos, Costa Rica, the lead of this ocean accounting pledge, we now move to another ocean accounting champion in the government of Belize. So today we have Ms. Grinage, a senior Blue Economy officer in the Ministry of Blue Economy, the government of Belize, to speak a bit about Belize's experience with ocean accounts. Andrina, thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to hand it over to you. We are seeing your presentation. Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So I will get started. So good morning, everyone. I'm Andrea Greenidge. I'm from the Ministry of Blue Economy and Marine Conservation, and I will be presenting on Belize's experience on or with ocean accounts. We also have an MOU with GOAP, and we also have signed the pledge. And so recognizing Belize's ocean value, Belize became one of the first countries globally to really establish a ministry dedicated solely to blue economy. And our approach was rooted deeply in integrated ocean governance, guided by tools such as our integrated coastal zone management plan and other marine spatial planning or blue economy frameworks. And so the Ministry of Blue Economy and Marine Conservation, our role is to coordinate across sectors and stakeholders to ensure sustainable ocean use in Belize. And so Belize's economy is really deeply connected to our ocean. We have sectors like tourism and fisheries, which rely heavily on our marine ecosystems. However, many of the benefits that we receive from our ocean, such as coastal protection from coral reefs or blue carbon storage in our mangroves and seagrasses, are not fully reflected in traditional economic data. And so at the same time, Belize is facing growing pressures from climate change, coastal development, and recently challenges from sargassum influxes. And I know this has been happening all over the Caribbean. And so these issues really highlight the need for a more better integrated information to guide decision making. And so traditionally, we have been measuring economic performance using GDP and other indicators. And so while these systems are useful, they don't fully account for the condition of our ecosystems. And so, for example, we can measure the value of our fisheries exports, but not whether the fish stocks are actually declining or whether coral reefs are actually degrading. And so ocean accounts really will help us to address this gap by integrating environmental, economic, and social data, allowing us to better understand the actual trade-offs and make more sustainable decisions. And so Belize has also made significant policy advances to support sustainable ocean management. And so these include such as I mentioned, the establishment of the Ministry of Blue Economy and Marine Conservation, of course, our Blue Bond, debt for nature swap, or plans like our Blue Economy Development Policy Strategy and Implementation Plan, our Integrated Coastal Zone and Ocean Management Act, which was recently passed. And so ocean accounts really will help us to build a foundation by providing the necessary data framework to support these policies. And so Belize's ocean accounts journey formally began through our partnership with the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership. This project started in 2024, and the Ocean Accounts Pilot, which is entitled Developing, Piloting, and Implementing Ocean Accounts for Belize, will conclude in May 2026. We also have an Ocean Social Accounts with GOAP, which will conclude in October 2026. And the national pilot is really led with the ministry and by the ministry with a lot of support from GOAP. And so the goal of these accounts really is to establish a standardized framework for ocean accounts in Belize, and it will allow us to systematically measure how our ocean really contributes to our economy, to our environment, and to our society. And so we really want to build national capacity in our country. And so this is a really key innovation of this pilot is our fellows program. And so rather than simply relying on full support from GOAP, we want to ensure that, GOAP guides us within the process, and we want to ensure that at the end of this project we have national capacity, we have trained individuals who can then do our accounts for us. And so each fellow addresses a critical part of the ocean accounts data value chain to ensure long-term sustainability. And so this work is highly collaborative. And so different institutions are responsible for different part of the process from data compilation or data collection to the actual compilation of the accounts, which will be done by the Statistical Institute of Belize. And so it ensures that this project is not a one-time project, but that it becomes embedded within national statistical systems. And so under this pilot, we're developing 3 main outputs. First, we have a coral reef extent and condition accounts, which will help us understand the health of our ecosystems. And then second, we have our ocean tourism satellite account, which will quantify the contribution of tourism to our economy. And then additionally, we're also developing an ocean economy satellite account. And so the real value will come from linking these together so that we can understand how ecosystem health influences economic outcomes. And so these pilots will be directly integrated into an MRV system for Blue Economy that we're also developing. We are developing this Blue Economy MRV with the support from the Inter-American Development Bank and the Natural Capital Alliance from Stanford University. And so this system will essentially track 35 national indicators across economic, social, and environmental dimensions. And so ocean accounts really will provide structured data that is needed to support these indicators. And so under the MRV, we will also be developing standardized methodologies for each KPI, how it's collected, how it's reported, managed, and then this will feed into a national dashboard or a visualization tool for decision makers and for policymakers. And so this is the last slide, but from transitioning to data to impact, and this is how ocean accounts will support our blue bond commitments, helping us track conservation sustainability targets in a measurable way, and it will also help us to link our investments directly to the outcomes, whether that is improved coral reef health, stronger livelihoods, or increased economic growth. And so through the MRV system, this information will become accessible and usable for policymakers, helping us guide decisions in a more transparent and accountable way. And so in closing, ocean accounts are really helping Belize move towards a system where we're not only measuring economic growth, but also ensuring that we have a more sustainable, inclusive system that is grounded in the health of our natural capital or our natural assets. And so that is really the shift from measuring outputs to really understanding the outcomes and the long-term and sustainable impact. Thank you.
Wow, Ms. Greenidge, thank you so much. It's great to hear from 2 of our regional champions. I really appreciated that you highlighted that GDP really fully does not account for the values, and this idea that we have this investment account, which is our natural capital assets, and we should live on the interest. We shouldn't be drawing down on the investment account, which is the health of our fish stocks, and the interest would maybe be our export. I really appreciate that. It was really great to see that it only took you about 2 years to get these accounts up and running, but also that you didn't just do accounts which are dollars and cents. You also you're working on these social accounts, which really capture some of these intangible values of nature's contribution to people, which we know are so important to move beyond the dollar figures. It's also really nice to see how you're institutionalizing this thing. It's not just a project that you need continuity. And I mean, we know with ocean natural capital accounting, but other tools, you need multiple data points to understand how things are changing. Also, it's nice to see that you did a coral reef account, a tourism account, and an ocean satellite account. So depending on the situation for each country, depending on the ecosystems, Costa Rica focused initially on mangroves, you're focusing on these ones. There's really options for people depending on what ecosystems they're dealing with. So now that we've heard the country experiences, the champions have raised our ambitions of the countries. I now want to move to our next speaker. You've heard a lot about GOAP. So you're going to hear from an applied economist from the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership, Ms. Jessica Bridgeland, to give us an introduction to the Ocean Accounts framework, some international commitments, but also some global examples beyond the region on this topic. So Jessica, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Alexander. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. As Alexander mentioned, my name's Jessica Bridgeland, and I'm from the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership, based at the UNSW Centre for Sustainable Development Reform. And today I'll be providing you with an overview of ocean accounts, their role in sustainable decision-making and international commitments, and taking you through some real-life examples of their application. But I want to start here to set the scene. This is where ocean accounting is already happening through GOAP membership or supported pilots, with 44 members spanning across 23 different countries. And this constitutes our global community of practice of ocean accounting. You can see several countries from the Latin America and the Caribbean region already, but we have ambition to go beyond this as well. So moving on to the why. We've heard from our some country examples already, but going back to kind of the broader why, the drive behind creating and using ocean accounts is their real life policy application. Most governments that depend heavily on the ocean can't easily answer three critical questions. What does our ocean or blue economy actually contribute to the whole economy in terms of jobs and output? How sustainable is that? Are we maintaining our natural assets, or are we degrading them in the process? And who is benefiting? Are coastal communities sharing in the gains, or are they being left behind? And these aren't technical questions, they're governance questions. And ocean accounts are designed to give you the data so that you can answer them. So diving into more detail on the approach to ocean accounting. As already mentioned, the Ocean Accounts Framework is aligned with statistical standards from the UN. And this is the same framework as national accounts, which means that the outputs are credible and also comparable internationally. The accounts track changes over time, not just a single snapshot. We can see, for example, what ocean economic sectors are doing well, or which might need a bit of a policy push. And that's what makes them useful for policy. You can see the trends, you can set the targets, and you can measure the progress. They use data that is locally relevant and detailed enough to support local decisions, as well as decisions at the national level and the regional level too. And critically, they help us understand the dependency on the ocean, which is essential for resilient and adaptive ocean governance. One thing worth saying, ocean accounts don't require you to start from scratch. So most governments already have relevant data, and this tends to be scattered across different ministries. So for example, fisheries has some, tourism might have some, environment has some, but it's often just that the data doesn't talk to each other. And ocean accounts act as the umbrella framework that brings it all together into one coherent system. And that's genuinely useful, not just for analysis, but for government coordination. And it's modular. You can start with what you have and build from there. Countries don't have to wait until they have perfect data to begin. And once they do begin, you can start to track your ocean wealth and health over time to make sure that both of those are optimized. We've seen through the previous two presentations about kind of just starting to develop accounts and then building on and adding more modules to these. I won't go into the technical structure here, but what we see on this slide is the extent of ecosystem supply in the top left, and then how it feeds all the way through into the economic input-output tables, the bottom right. So what this does, it allows ecosystem supply to now be reflected as part of the economic production function. It's worth saying that behind every indicator that we have for policy making are these structured accounting tables. And this is what they look like, which is why I share this slide. And these follow the international standards. And this means that the outputs are credible and comparable. And once they're built, actually producing updated each figure is a very manageable exercise. It's not a major research project each time at all. The process itself follows a structured process from data compilation all the way through to policy application. So you draw on data that already exists across government, as I mentioned, statistics offices, sector ministries, environmental agencies. That gets compiled into an accounting structure, which then produces outputs that can be used domestically for planning, shared regionally with others, or reported internationally. And where the data doesn't exist across government, this process helps you identify and then fill those gaps as needed. The accounts are flexible to work at different scales. So from a specific marine protected area, looking at kind of the policy outcome of that, to a coastline, to a national economy. And because they follow international standards, as I've mentioned, what you produce is comparable with other countries and what they produce, which means when you're in those multilateral negotiations, you're talking the same language. This diagram is worth pausing on for a second. Your natural assets, far left, are the foundation of your blue economy, your ocean economy, far right. And ocean accounts make that dependency explicit and trackable. So instead of discovering the problem when a fishery collapses or tourism slows down, you can start to see that pressure building, and it allows you to respond earlier. You can also spot and track opportunities, which can channel your investment smartly. We've started talking about the policy relevance of ocean accounts, but where does it sit in the broader policy landscape? So every government operates within a set of commitments, where you have international frameworks at the top, and these flow down into national laws and policies, which have their own goals and targets. And then there are different levers that we can pull to achieve those goals and targets. So for example, marine spatial planning, marine protected areas, blue economy strategies, and so on. And each of these should have an impact to the environment, economy, and to society. And often we're tasked with producing indicators so that we can measure our progress towards these commitments. And we can also use that same data to inform those implementation frameworks, so informing marine spatial planning, for example. And ocean accounts sit in the middle as the data system that connects all of this together. So ocean accounts generate the indicators that allow you to measure progress against your commitments, whether that's SDG 14, your biodiversity targets, or your national blue economy strategy. The main point is this isn't parallel to what you're already doing. It should feed in to what you're doing already. And here are some indicators of examples that ocean accounts could inform. So on the economy side, we've got an ocean contribution to GDP by sector. We've got tourism dependency on healthy ecosystems. We've got jobs in ocean industries. On the environment side, we've got area and health of coral reefs, for example, and whether that's they're expanding or shrinking. On the social side, we could look at the proportion of coastal communities dependent on fish for food, or look at food poverty rates in coastal areas, or women's participation in ocean industries. And in practice, which indicators are best depends on your local context, but ocean accounts can support in tailoring these to your context. As I mentioned a few slides ago, ocean accounts directly feed up to international commitments, such as the Global Biodiversity Framework and the Sustainable Development Goals. Its link in some cases is very obvious, such as with Sustainable Development Goal 14, Life Below Water, which is a more obvious one. But ocean accounts are also relevant to many other Sustainable Development Goals, for example, 1 on poverty, or 2 on food security, and so on. And for international commitments that carry real reporting obligations, ocean accounts are one of the most efficient ways to meet them because they generate exactly the kind of standardized, comparable data that international bodies ask for. The political momentum behind ocean accounts has reflected its role in national and international policy. So ocean accounts have been endorsed under the UN Ocean Decade and recognized by the high-level panel as crucial for evidence-based sustainable ocean plans. As Costa Rica has already mentioned, at the third UNOC conference, ocean accounting was formally recognized as critical for sustainable ocean management, and 19 countries and 7 organizations signed the pledge to advance ocean accounts by 2030, which was a result of the drive of Costa Rica with signatories across Latin America and the Caribbean. Now let me take you through some examples of what this looks like in practice. These examples come from countries that have already built ocean accounts with GOAP support. So to kick off, here is an example for the economic domain, which shows a complete breakdown of what the ocean economy contributes by sector for this country. So you can see across the rows, we've got living resources, marine construction, all the way to tourism and recreation. And for each of these, we then have number of businesses, jobs, wages, and GDP contribution. This is a snapshot, but the idea would be that you then have this at multiple periods over time so you can track the change in jobs within the different areas. For many countries, this kind of sector by sector breakdown simply doesn't exist yet, but having it produced as with the same methodology as your national GDP changes what you can say to a finance minister in an international negotiation. You can start to track those sectors that are of particular importance for your economy. You can identify those that are opportunities. Are they starting to grow in momentum? Is there potential to invest more to grow one of the sectors? Which sectors are jobs really reliant on? So in this scenario, you can see tourism recreation has a particularly high number of jobs relative to the other sectors. So it helps you identify your policies that can influence your ocean economy. Mozambique is a really good example of the complex systems that we are trying to boil down simply. So there's hence a slightly complex slide here. So what you see here, it's not a new data collection program, it's an integration exercise. So Mozambique already had data in its fisheries ministry, its tourism ministry, transport agency, statistics office. And what Ocean Accounts did was bring this all together into one framework. And the result was the first comprehensive picture of what Mozambique's blue economy contributes to the national economy. And data that existed but was sitting in silos became a usable policy tool. And once you have that system in place, you can track it over time. So this chart shows Mozambique's blue economy gross value added, which is essentially the slice of gross domestic product of interest from 2019 to 2023. It's simple but significant. For the first time, we can see whether the blue economy is growing or shrinking relative to the rest of the economy. And we can track that year on year. And that's the critical difference between a one-off study and a governance tool. An Ocean Accounts is meant to be a governance tool. So moving on to the environmental domain. So here's an environmental example, and it is tracking how different ecosystems change over time. So at the top here, you can see our different ecosystems, and it's between 2019 and 2020. And we can see the change between those periods on this bottom line here. It allows us to identify which ecosystems are expanding, which are growing, and which are shrinking. So in this example, let's just hone in on one. We'll hone in on mangroves. And here we can see mangroves are down 3.2%. Now that sounds small, but mangroves are coastal protection. They're fish nurseries. They store blue carbon. And they support livelihoods for coastal communities. So tracking that loss precisely year by year in square kilometres and as a percentage change means that policymakers can intervene before it's irreversible. Looking at this example, so this is the Gili Islands in Indonesia. The economic of coral reefs was tracked again between 2015 and 2021 in this scenario. Coral reefs are particularly relevant for this region, and ocean accounts allowed them to quantify what reefs actually contribute to tourism revenue, fisheries, coastal protection, and how this actually changed from management. So here we've got the 2015 values, and you can see that they have actually increased for the 2021 values. And where coral reefs are of particular importance for Indonesia, for the Gili Islands here, we honed in particularly on the ecosystem services provided of that, noted here. And when we can put a number on what a reef is worth, conservation stops being a cost and it becomes a return on investment. And that changes the conversation in budget negotiations, in infrastructure approvals. On to another example. So I like this one. So this is a small island atoll. And if you look at the aerial image to the right, this is what ocean accounts can produce for climate adaptation planning. So the blue hatched area along the coastline shows where the reef is providing natural coastal protection, so a 100-meter buffer zone. However, here you can see these pink blocks, and these are actually census blocks that sit outside the buffer, unprotected by natural ecosystems. So with ocean accounts, you can answer two questions at once, really. Where is nature protecting us? And who is living in the places where nature is not protecting? And that's the combination of ecosystem extent account and census data in this scenario. And then once we have that, your adaptation decisions become much more targeted. Which stretches of coastline need reef restoration? Where is hard infrastructure most urgently needed? On to the last example. So this last example shows how ocean accounts can be used to trace the human impact of an environmental event. So here we've got a coral bleaching event that is detected in the ecosystem accounts. The accounts then link that to declining fish abundance, reduced catches for reef fisheries, falling incomes for fishing families, and then deteriorating food security in coastal communities. And that full chain from reef condition to people's livelihoods, tracked through data, is what allows governments to respond effectively, not just to the ecological event itself, but to the social and economic consequences that follow, such as creating policies to target those people who depend on the reef. And with that, I will close my presentation. I hope that gave you a useful sense of what ocean accounts are and what they can do for decision making. If any of this resonates with what your government or organisation is trying to do, please do get in touch, and we would love to explore this further with you. And I'll hand back to you, Alexander.
Jessica, thank you so much. You got us not only looking at the forest, but looking at the specific trees and how the ocean accounts actually work. I think one of the key takeaways for me was this idea of modularity, that it can go as far as you need it and it can really respond to your specific local needs. But even going there, it doesn't necessarily require you to collect new data. Yes, for sure, using the framework helps you identify data gaps. But by bringing all the data into one house, bringing all the existing data into one house, in the case of Mozambique, you said it became a really useful policy tool. I also like that even though we're saying, we want to move beyond GDP, it can work with GDP. And, you said there's an economic, environmental, and social. And within the economic, it links it right back to GDP figures, employment, but also other, hardcore economic statistics. I really like that you're emphasizing that this may seem like a technical exercise, but really it's a governance tool, and that's something that we want people to recognize. And then I loved what you said when you said, it demonstrated in some cases that conservation is not a cost, but it generates a significant return on investment. In one of those last examples you highlighted with the climate change and the coastal protection, I think it's really interesting to make that ocean climate change link, because it can maybe even in the example you gave, guide adaptation investments. that are going to be necessary for many of our small island development states. So that ocean climate link is also quite strongly there. So Jessica, thank you so very much for that presentation. I'm going to move now into our panel discussion. And we, of course, have our previous three presenters. So we have Jessica from GOAP, we have Ms. Greenidge from Belize, we also have Carlos from Costa Rica, but we're adding two more people to the mix. We have Ms. Robin Brown, a technical officer from the Blue Economy Department of the Government of Antigua and Barbuda. And we also have Gabriela Encancada, a senior environmental specialist on the ProBlue project from the World Bank. So we have another country experience, but we're also bringing in kind of the perspective of the development banks. Moving right into the panel to try and catch up some time. I think my first question actually is for you, Jessica, so I'm happy that you're still highlighted on the screen. So, we've heard about all this fantastic work that GOAP has been doing, and the frameworks and the approaches that you have been instrumental in standardizing how we measure the ocean's value. So you're working with this network of countries across the globe. So from a global perspective, how can the adoption of ocean accounts specifically help us in the Caribbean, so specifically help Caribbean nations bridge that gap between these high-level commitments that we're happy to be a part of, environmental commitments, but also bridge that gap between the high-level and tangible economic policy grounded in reality in our countries. So Jessica, that question's for you.
Thank you for your question, Alexander. A really important one. The gap you're describing is essentially a translation problem. So governments tend to make environmental commitments in one language. So these could be biodiversity targets or ecosystem protection goals. And then economic policy in a completely different language. So talking in terms of gross domestic product, fiscal budgets, and investment returns. And those two conversations rarely happen in the same room. And when they do, they struggle to connect. And what Ocean Accounts does is it's the translation layer between those two languages. So it brings together the environmental picture, so that the health, the extent of reefs, mangroves, fish stocks, with the economic picture of what these ecosystems contribute to national income and employment. And then the social picture of who actually depends on them and who is most at risk when they degrade. And most critically, they express all of that in a format that is completely compatible with national economic planning. So bringing it into the Caribbean context, when a Caribbean government has signed up to a commitment to protect 30% of its ocean under the Global Biodiversity Framework, ocean accounts are what allow that commitment to show up in budget conversations. You can point to what those ecosystems are worth economically, which sectors depend on them, but also which coastal communities would be affected if they were to decline. And that commitment stops being an environmental pledge as it was initially made, and it becomes a quantifiable economic interest. And that matters enormously for small island states. So these are governments where the ocean is central to the economy and communities, whether that be through tourism or coastal protection, as we just talked about climate adaptation, or fisheries. They tend to have large blue economies, and their economic policies are therefore inherently reliant on the marine environment. And we therefore need the data to connect the two together, and Ocean Accounts is very much the tool that builds that bridge. And once that bridge exists, the sustainable ocean management, as we talked about, it stops being a cost to justify, and it becomes an investment, and it becomes an investment with a measurable return.
Great, Jessica. Thank you so much for that. I really like this idea of connecting you to and being the translator. It's kind of also what we do at the Ocean Coordination Mechanism. We also have translators working today. So taking that high level to reality, I think is so important. So thank you so much for that, Jessica. Coming back to the countries and Carlos. Carlos, Costa Rica has a very long history of environmental accounting. We saw that you were doing this in 2012 with the WAVES project with World Bank. I remember this when we were having the first editions of the SEEA system of environmental economic accounts. So Carlos, in your experience with the Ministry of Environment and Energy, what has been the primary challenges, but also opportunities for integrating marine data into national sectoral planning and the development of ocean accounts? So, we know that you are the most advanced. So I think hearing about some of the challenges that you faced, but also some of the opportunities would be instructive to the countries that are about to follow your path. So over to you, Carlos.
Gracias, Alexander. Creo que el primer reto ha sido el posicionamiento de los temas marinos como un tema importante, pero también dentro de la planificación, pero también como un tema que requiere el mismo detalle o más que las políticas ambientales continentales. Creo que me parece que también es una tendencia mundial, que tendemos a simplificar la planificación sobre el océano, porque no vivimos en el océano, vivimos en el continente. Entonces tenemos muchísima más claridad de las variables que intervienen en nuestra vida y en nuestra economía y en nuestra sociedad en el continente, pero no tanto en el océano. Hay todavía a niveles políticos, a niveles económicos, como mencionaba Jessica, falta todavía ese posicionamiento. Y me gustó algo que ella mencionó sobre la traducción de los beneficios en el lenguaje político, en el lenguaje económico, para que sea incluido dentro de la planificación sectorial. Entonces creo que ese es el primer reto que hemos tenido, de posicionar la importancia de generar datos y cuentas en el océano, para generar política pública también en el océano. Y un ejemplo sencillo de esto es, por ejemplo, que nosotros somos un ejemplo internacional de políticas ambientales, pero nuestro gran recorrido es continental. Todavía tenemos grandes retos en la parte del océano, y así es también en muchos países del mundo. Y como esto, este posicionamiento también es difícil con otro reto, que es un tema que puede ser muy técnico y que no suene atractivo dentro de agendas políticas importantes, porque suele explicarse de una manera densa, de una manera técnica, lo requiere porque es muy técnico, pero también tenemos que encontrar la manera de posicionarlo de una manera estratégica. Tenemos que posicionar el tema en las agendas nacionales de esa manera. Y una oportunidad grande que mencionaría es que sucede mucho en países de América Latina o países del sur global, incluido Costa Rica, y es las diferencias territoriales en desarrollo económico. Nosotros tendemos a minimizar áreas que son ricas en recursos naturales y su papel en el desarrollo económico. Entonces tenemos grandes diferencias en nuestro país y en el sur global de áreas muy desarrolladas, áreas ricas, áreas con mucha prosperidad y bienestar, y tenemos otras áreas muy abandonadas, y coincide en nuestro país con las áreas costeras, porque las 4 ciudades capitales más importantes están dentro del país y no son áreas costeras. Entonces, coincide con que nuestro país tiene las áreas con menor desarrollo económico en las costas. Entonces, creo que ahí también hay una gran oportunidad para posicionar las cuentas de recursos marinos y costeros como una oportunidad de desarrollo, como una oportunidad de posicionamiento y como una oportunidad de inclusión de este tipo de cálculos ambientales y estadísticos del océano dentro de la planificación sectorial y nacional.
Great, Carlos. Thank you so very much for that. It's really important that you said, for the high level policymakers, it needs to also be very strategic. And I think that's maybe where the high level indicators come in. In terms of this opportunity that exists for Central America, as you said, many of the capitals are based inland and not at the coast, and the coast is maybe not as well developed. Maybe that's an opportunity for you to learn from some of the islands, because in many of the islands, it's actually the opposite case, because we're volcanic islands, most of the development is on the coast. So maybe an opportunity there for you to learn from us, things that we've done well, things that we could do better. I really like this thing, the strategic for the high level and maybe some indicators. So Jessica may come back to you with a question on that. Moving to Antigua and Barbuda, Robin, thank you so much for being here. We know that we had the SIDS conference in Antigua and Barbuda, and Antigua and Barbuda is a vocal advocate for small island developing states. How could a harmonized or regional approach to ocean accounts in the wider Caribbean empower islands to better negotiate climate finance and sustainable investment?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Alexander, for that question. From the perspective of Antigua and Barbuda, and more broadly as SIDS, a harmonized regional approach to ocean accounts is not just beneficial, it's essential. And the ocean account framework allows us to translate our ocean assets, such as coral reefs, mangroves, seagrasses, into economic and financial languages. For SIDS, this is critical because our economies are deeply ocean dependent, yet historically undervalued in national accounting systems. For the wider Caribbean, a harmonized approach across the Caribbean can enable comparable data and metrics, which is critical for engaging climate finance institutions. Stronger positioning under global frameworks, such as the UN Framework Convention of Climate Change, and a shift in moral arguments to investment cases where we can quantify the economic contribution of marine ecosystems, the cost of degradation, and the return on conservation. For example, evaluating a coral reef not just as biodiversity, but as a coastal protection infrastructure could strengthen our cases for adaptation financing. Also, through organizations, collaborations such as CARICOM and OECS can also harmonize ocean accounts, supporting regional blue economy portfolios, enable larger, more attractive investment packages, per se, and facilitate innovative instruments such as blue bonds and debt for nature swaps. These are particularly important for SIDS, as we all know, which is individual economies are small, but collectively represent a significant and investable ocean.
Robin, thank you so much. You hit so many points there. I really like this idea of comparable data. Antigua and Barbuda, it's a twin island state, but you have neighbors, some who are as close as Barbuda is to Antigua, with Montserrat, etc. So the idea that this is a shared ocean space, and I really like we emphasize our ocean, it's not oceans, it's all interconnected. That's super important. So, having that standardization, allowing comparison between countries, which, I know that in Antigua and Barbuda, you guys have spiny lobster, queen conch, and those fishery stocks are shared fishery stocks. So, maybe 1 year, one person has a major boost, but the rest of the OECS has a drawdown. And that's a warning sign using a regional or harmonized approach to ocean accounts. In terms of the connection to investments, as you said, we are small island developing states in CARICOM and OECS. And some of these investment sizes from the big donors, from the big funds, from the private sector, they want to make big investments. So pooling these investment packages using ocean accounts as a framework to identify those opportunities is super powerful, because then we reach what they call ticket sizes, which are big enough for people to want to fund and are not super high transaction costs, because you have to go and negotiate a new agreement or a new agreement with each country. So thanks so much for that, Robin. And great that you connected it back to big investments, because now we're going to go to the World Bank. Gabriela of ProBlue, a big program at the World Bank. So ProBlue plays a vital role in supporting the blue transition. From the World Bank's perspective, how does having a robust ocean accounts help the decision-making process for countries, but also within the bank? So what specific advantages do you see for countries in the region embarking on this data journey. Gabriela?
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. And as Alexander mentioned, I'm Gabriela Encalada, and I work with the ProBlue Trust Fund at the World Bank. And before even going into the question, I would like to start by thanking the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership and the wider Caribbean Ocean Coordination Mechanism and all the partners for convening this important discussion. It is a real pleasure for me to be here and be part of this panel, and particularly as we build momentum towards our Ocean Conference 2026. And very briefly, even before going into the question, for those of you that don't know what ProBlue is, as you mentioned, ProBlue, it is our program and our ocean program in the bank, which is a trust fund, multi-donor trust fund that supports countries protect and use ocean and coastal ecosystems in a way that supports economic growth, jobs, and environmental sustainability by building the foundations of a sustainable and inclusive blue economy, and it does so across 4 pillars. But a central part of this work is strengthening what we call readiness. So this means helping countries assess whether they have the right enabling conditions in place, including strong governance frameworks, adequate technical capacity, and also clear strategic priorities. So now that I have given a little bit of explanation what we do, and in response to the question, I would like to share a few reflections from our work through the ProBlue program at the World Bank. And I would like to start by building on what other panelists have already highlighted, that data is truly the foundation of what we're trying to achieve in the blue economy space. So from our perspective, robust ocean accounts are ultimately about better decision-making. They provide a structured way to integrate data across environmental, economic, and social dimensions, and helping countries clearly understand how ocean assets contribute not only to growth and resilience, but also to jobs and livelihood that depend on healthy marine ecosystems. Then this is particularly important in regions like Latin America and the Caribbean, where marine resources are central to economic development, biodiversity, and also climate resilience. Yet decision-making has often been challenged by fragmented data and also the competing priorities. So ocean accounts help address this by creating a common evidence base. So from governments, this means being able to make more informed and transparent policy decisions. So for example, understanding trade-offs between the coastal development and ecosystem conservation, or prioritizing also investments that deliver both economic and environmental returns, right? Now, what we're seeing nowadays is that across the region, countries are asking us the same fundamental questions. How large is our blue economy? What are our marine ecosystems actually worth, right? And where should we invest to achieve the best outcomes for people and nature? So this is where oceans accounts are how we answer these questions, and with evidence rather than just assumptions. And they help us to move from anecdote to analysis, and from fragmented decisions making to more integrated and strategic planning. And so for countries, robust ocean accounts make several things possible that otherwise are just very difficult to achieve. First, what they do is to help measure what matters. Ocean accounts allow governments to quantify not only the economic contributions of ocean sectors, such as fisheries, tourism, maritime transport, but also the health and value of marine ecosystems. This provides a much more complete picture, going beyond the GDP, like it was mentioned, to include the natural capital that underpins the economic activity. And the second thing is that they help manage these trade-offs. When countries have data and how ocean sectors interact, where fishing overlaps with conservation, where tourism depends on reef health, or where offshore energy may affect the livelihoods, they can make better informed spatial decisions. And this is why ocean accounts are closely also linked to marine spatial planning that has been widely mentioned also through the different discussions and presentations. And the spatial planning provides the framework, and ocean accounts provide the evidence to guide those decisions. A third point is that they help integrate oceans into national planning. One persistent challenge is that the ocean resources are often invisible in national budgets and development plans. So tools such as the Blue Economy satellite accounts and Blue public expenditure reviews help to make these ocean contributions visible within the system that finance ministries and planning agencies actually use. And then finally, they strengthen the accountability. When data in ecosystems health and economic value is transparent and regularly updated, it creates a baseline to track progress and actually hold institutions accountable over time. So that said, now from the World Bank perspective, ocean accounts are also critical for improving the quality of our work. They allow us to design more targeted investments by identifying where the most valuable natural capital is and where pressures are the greatest, right? So they strengthen our diagnostics tools, and such as the Blue Economy Development Framework, by ensuring that country assessments are grounded in solid evidence, right? And importantly, they help us demonstrate results showing how investments, for example, in mangrove restorations, can deliver measurable benefits in terms of carbon storage, coastal protection, and livelihoods as well. And this is where ProBlue program plays a catalytic role. Through ProBlue and the Global Program on Sustainability from the World Bank, we support countries in developing 3 complementary types of ocean accounts, which is the Blue Economy satellite account to measure economic contributions, the natural capital accounts aligned with the UNC framework to track ecosystems, health, and services, and also the Blue public expenditure reviews to improve the transparency on how resources are allocated. And we also work closely with the GOAP, which supports countries going beyond the GDP and integrating these ocean values into decision-making and governance processes. So turning into the last part of the question, so what are the advantages for countries in the region? We see there are several very concrete benefits. First, it helps to unlock the climate finance. Many countries have significant blue carbon assets, such as the mangroves and seagrasses, but accessing carbon markets requires robust data and carbon stocks, sequestration rates, and also monitoring systems, and ocean accounts provide that foundation. And we have seen this directly in Belize. I'm so happy to see the representation here, where early stage readiness work through ProBlue, including the Blue Carbon Readiness Framework, enabled the country to move from diagnostic to carbon market participation with follow-up on support from other funds like Scale and Partnership for Market Implementation. A second advantage is that they strengthen marine spatial planning. Several countries in the region are already advancing in marine spatial plans and ocean accounts, like it has been mentioned, and make these efforts more effective by providing the economic and environmental evidence needed to allocate ocean space widely and reduce conflicts between sectors. A third one is that they help attract invest. And what we consistently see is that strong data foundations help de-risk investment, giving both the public and the private partners a greater confidence that resources will be used effectively and that results can be actually measured. And a fourth one is that they build sovereignty over ocean resources. By developing their own ocean account systems, countries can define their own narratives, strengthen their institutional capacity, and continuously monitor and adapt their policies as needed. And to close, let me just come back to where I started. What we've been discussing today, in ocean accounting isn't just a technical exercise, which is something that you already said it before, and Jessica did too. It is really about how we see and value the ocean in our economies, in our decisions as well. And as I mentioned earlier, from our experience through the ProBlue program at the World Bank, one thing is clear. When countries begin to account for their ocean assets in a more systematically way, it changes the conversation. It helps shift the focus from short-term extraction to a long-term stewardship. But the numbers alone are not at the end of the goal. What matters is how they're used. to guide the policy, to inform investment, and to bring different sectors together around a shared understanding of value. So the opportunity in front of us is not just to build better data systems, but to build a stronger bridge between data and decision making. And if we get that right, the ocean accounting can become a powerful tool for sustainable growth, resilience, and also livelihoods. And just let me end on this note. The ocean already sustains us in a countless way, but ocean accounting gives us a way to recognize the value more clearly, and importantly, to act on it more responsibly. But none of this happens in isolation, right? It really depends on a strong collaboration across government partners and the private sector as well. And only by aligning all the efforts and working also together, we can drive a change and scale, truly support countries through this transition. Thank you, and sorry for expanding a little.
Gabriela, that expansion was welcomed, not by myself, but also by the participants. I think you hit on a lot of very important points there. I really like that you started with something which is foundational to the OCM, which is a concept of the SDG wedding cake. The idea that there are these environmental SDGs, including life below water, and building on a healthy, sustainable environment allows us to have healthy economies, but also healthy societies. So having that as a foundation and knowing that ProBlue is working on that, I think is quite heartening. Again, your focus really was on better decision-making about investments, better decision-making about trade-offs. And I think it was really nice that you introduced that spatial component of what happens with ocean accounts. That there are competing uses because of the rapid growth of the blue economy. There are going to be even more competing uses. So governments really have to make difficult trade-off decisions, not just in terms of how they spend their dollar, but how they're going to develop specific areas. You also really touched on something which is important, I think, for a lot of our participants, because here we have government representatives, people from technical institutions, but we do also have some people from civil society. So you hit on this idea of accountability, and that being really a powerful aspect of the tool as well. It was really exciting to hear about the catalytic role that ProBlue plays, and that you are actually supporting ocean accounts in specific countries, so that people who have the ambition or have a raised ambition because of this webinar, they also will know that there are resources out there potentially to support them if their governments are able to make the right moves with the ProBlue program. And then finally, this idea of de-risking investment. I think that's critical. As you said, you guys are making investments, but the private sector is also making investments. And somebody coming in, or even an investor within the country, knowing that there's an ocean accounts framework being implemented means that I can feel a little bit more secure about deploying that money for a healthier marine environment and healthy social and social, economic, and environmental outcomes. Okay, with that, and Gabriela, thank you again so much for that. I'm going to come back to Costa Rica and come back to, as we're coming towards the close of the webinar, this idea of pledges and next steps. So Carlos, Costa Rica has been very proactive in making international commitments and pledges regarding the ocean. As we said, you're one of our champion countries in the region. So from your perspective at the ministry, has formalizing these pledges effectively catalyzed the flow of resources, both from national budgets, but also international cooperation, specifically towards the development of ocean accounts? In essence, I'm really asking, has making the pledge opened doors for technical and financial investments in your country? And Carlos, I don't want to preempt your question, but I also want to say that I'm in Costa Rica right now to meet with Carlos and his team, because the project that supports the Ocean Coordination Mechanism, PROCOBIT Plus, has a specific pot of money to support ocean accounts in Costa Rica. So, Carlos, don't feel like I prejudiced your question there. But I'm really asking, has making the pledge opened the doors for technical and financial investment in your country? And would you encourage other countries to also make this pledge? Carlos, over to you.
Gracias, Alexander. Sí, esta pregunta me encanta porque es ya la ejecución. Una cosa es el compromiso y otra cosa es la ejecución. Y es una gran responsabilidad y también mucho trabajo. Creo que Costa Rica recibe mucha cooperación internacional en temas ambientales. Entonces, el reto que hemos tenido es direccionar parte de esa cooperación internacional hacia temas de la cuenca del océano. No es sencillo porque, en primer lugar, tenemos que hacer una planificación estratégica de qué es lo que necesitamos de aquí a 2030. Como han podido ya intuir, es complejo porque tenemos muchas necesidades. Por ejemplo, tenemos necesidades de estandarización de la información, tenemos necesidades de gobernanza y flujos entre los responsables de la generación de la información y coordinación entre ellos. También tenemos necesidades de generación de nueva información, pero nos hemos también dado cuenta que tenemos ya bastante información, solo que no está lo suficientemente organizada y estandarizada para poder ser utilizada. Y también tenemos otras objetivos que hemos determinado en nuestra hoja de ruta en la que pues no tenemos absolutamente nada. Entonces, lo primero que estamos haciendo es determinar una hoja de ruta y luego determinar una estrategia nacional para las cuentas ambientales 2030, porque una cosa es el compromiso, una cosa es el pledge, pero otra cosa es el camino de la ejecución, en donde necesitamos determinar qué línea base tenemos, cuáles serán los pilotos y las áreas geográficas prioritarias, cuáles serán también los temas prioritarios. Entonces ya hemos determinado con talleres a nivel nacional que vamos a iniciar con manglares, con cuencas sociales, con arrecifes coralinos, pastos marinos y otros temas que tienen que ver con cambio climático, y luego ir diseñando estos objetivos, determinando qué tenemos, qué no tenemos y hacia dónde dirigir los recursos. Entonces, yo todavía no te podría decir que ha sido exitoso porque estamos en el proceso de hacerlo. Esperaría que en 2030 pueda decirles que fue exitoso, pero es un gran trabajo poner tantos personas de acuerdo, porque estamos hablando de personas de la academia, estamos hablando de otras instituciones públicas, estamos hablando también de muchos cooperantes. Entonces, precisamente, por ejemplo, la reunión que tenemos nosotros esta semana acá en Costa Rica, Alexander y yo, tiene que ver con hablar con el área de cooperación internacional de nuestro ministerio para organizar las cooperaciones internacionales que están, por ejemplo, el proyecto de Procaribe, ¿verdad? Entre también los cooperantes que ha conseguido la GOAP, el BIT, por ejemplo, también ha estado interesado. Entonces tenemos que organizarlos para no traslapar esfuerzos y para no dejar vacíos tampoco, también importantes y para no desperdiciar tampoco o desaprovechar pues los cooperantes que quieren formar parte de esto. Entonces creo que hacer esta estrategia, hacer una planificación de aquí a 2030, esto lo estamos haciendo totalmente de la mano con la GOAP, con su asesoría técnica, será vital para poder ir ordenando y supliendo las necesidades de manera sistemática y que no se nos haga un embrollo y poderlo cumplir de aquí a 2030.
Carlos, I really appreciate that throughout your interventions, you've been real with us. You've been honest about the challenges that you've faced, and also that you're en camino. You're in the process of doing this. It was really important to hear about this idea of a roadmap, and that you have some of the steps funded, some of the steps are not funded. You may have some gaps, but you have people who are interested. And based on the pledge, you've had a significant inflow of interest, and now you're working to organize that interest to make sure that there's not overlaps. So again, thank you so much for all of your interventions, but particularly being very honest about how this is working and that it's a process that's in train. I already have seen in the chat that some people are interested. I've seen interest from St. Kitts and Nevis in GOAP and the work that's happening. I just want to say that we will probably have time for one or two questions. So please feel free to put some questions in the chat box, and I'll do my best to pull some of those questions and ask our panelists. So you spoke about the benefits of the pledge, Carlos. Now I'm going to ask directly to Jessica. If people would like to join the pledge, basically how would they do so? So for those representatives of countries, but also organizations that are listening, who are inspired by today's discussion, the benefits that have been mentioned by the various countries and organizations, what is a specific process to sign the Ocean Accounts Pledge and officially join the Ocean Accounts Partnership? And then, once a country joins, beyond the formal signature, what do you think are other benefits to a country institution when they become part of this GOAP community? So Jessica, over to you.
Thanks, Alexander. So I'll separate this out. I'll talk about the pledge first and then the membership. So the Ocean Accounts Pledge, which we've discussed at length today, it's completely voluntary, but it's a public and political commitment. And this is different to the GOAP membership, which is a broader voluntary coalition. It's not with political commitment, but it facilitates technical support and collaboration in developing ocean accounts. The pledge is very much a political movement. There's no financial commitment involved either. As I mentioned earlier, we've had 19 countries so far signed, 7 organizations, including multilateral organizations. And this was really driven forward by Costa Rica, as I mentioned. But we want to open up this pledge further, want to go beyond UNOC to create a wider alliance for countries to learn from each other and to push each other to advance ocean accounts by 2030. It's already an attraction for funders to support, and it really signals credibility on ocean governance. So we are, with that all in mind, we are looking to have an event, our ocean conference, for countries to sign the pledge at a ministerial or appropriate level. In terms of immediate action, if you would like to join the pledge, please email me directly. I will provide my contact details after the session. And as the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership, we stand ready to support countries who have signed through the technical assistance and broader policy analysis as well. As I mentioned, separate to the pledge, we have GOAP membership. And this is more technical than political. And as a member, you get access to GOAP's technical guidance and methodological resources, connection to our fellows network. So this is a network of leading experts who can provide direct technical support through capacity building workshops and training throughout the year. And you get early access to our publications and research too. But I'd say if I was to pinpoint the most valuable thing from being a member, it's the peer network. So countries learn most from other countries facing similar challenges. It's been brilliant to hear from Costa Rica and Belize and others today, and getting those kind of candid, honest progress updates from Costa Rica on where things are progressing and learning from each other. That is really where the value comes in. Again, process very similar to the pledge. If you would like to become a member, please email me and we'll get this organized for you.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Jessica. And I hope you have a tidal wave in your inbox of people who are interested in participating in ocean accounts. And it's really heartening as well to hear about that peer network. I was at UNOC, I saw your presentation there, and it was really great to hear about countries across the world who have similar challenges, but also similar ecosystems and opportunities of how they're using ocean accounts. So this is not just something in theory, this is something that's really happening in practice. I see that we do have one question in the chat box, and I'm actually going to leave it open to any of our panelists to respond to. The question is, how has ocean accounting processes translated to increased ocean interaction, increased oceans, sorry, it's just blocking it here. Increased oceans, I think it's interactions with countries' NDCs, specifically as it relates to mobilizing finance and greenhouse gas accounting. So just to make a plug here, our next webinar is actually on ocean climate interactions and on blue NDCs. So if you want to hear more about blue NDCs, that will be next week. And this is co-hosted with the government of France and the government of Brazil, who are leading the NDC partnership. We are also here at ProQuibbit Plus supporting blue NDCs in 5 countries in the region, with a collaboration through Pew Charitable Trust. So to our panelists, how does ocean accounting connect to blue NDCs and greenhouse gas emission monitoring, but also, I guess, sequestration monitoring? I also heard Gabriela from ProBlue make a connection to the sale of blue carbon. So I don't know if anybody would like to respond to that question.
I can just come in briefly, and basically just thinking out loud, the importance of this ocean accounting is that it's helping basically countries to move from a broad commitment into more concrete, actionable NDCs, right? And when you strengthen, and by strengthening this database, it allows the countries to better capture the blue carbon into the GHG inventories, and also set more credible, measurable targets. So, and also at the same time, it links environmental and economic data in a way that helps identify investments and investment priorities, basically, and build a pipeline of, I'm going to use the word that we use at the bankable projects. So basically more investment, right? So basically ocean accounts are helping to translate ambition into implementation, and making this easier to mobilize finance to ensure it's directed, basically, where it can deliver a greatest climate and development impact. That in short.
Thank you so much for that off the cuff response, Gabriela. I think it did respond to the question. I don't know if any of our other panelists may want to add to that. Connection to blue NDCs.
Well, I'll just add briefly. I won't add too much because I feel like Gabriela captured that wonderfully. But I think it's all linked to the indices. Is all linked to the lack of quantified evidence, and ocean accounts enabling the provision of the standardized data set that allows the ocean to be better reflected in those. Just a point on the greenhouse gases accounting. My understanding is that the integration is still being worked through in that area. But we can start to reflect the asset level data that underpins blue carbon crediting, for example. I'll pause there because the rest was captured very nicely by Gabrielle.
Perfect. So I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. Jessica, I did actually have a question in reaction to something I think Carlos said about the high-level indicators for policymakers. So of course, we have those beautiful and complex accounts, which I'm very excited by as an environmental economist, but maybe for policymakers, the ministerial, prime ministerial level, what kind of indicators can we see from ocean accounts that you think are useful in communicating to them?
Cool. So I'm kind of going back to what I said in the presentation. It is so context specific what indicators you would want to pull out, and what the ocean accounts does, it provides the data to then feed into those indicators. So these could be stretched across all three of the domains. You could have environmental indicators on if there was a particular ecosystem, for example, that you noted was of a particular importance for your economy and community. You could start tracking the health of that ecosystem. But kind of beyond that, I think the social indicators are of real value. So really starting to pull out that dependency on the ocean of communities, starting to bring in gender considerations into the indicators. So I think before I talked to proportion of women in coastal industries, for example. Or number of the population who are in food poverty, which could be an element of which ocean accounts can start feeding through via food security and the provision of fisheries. And then you have your standard economic indicators, but with an ocean brush over it. So ocean related GDP is kind of a headline indicator that is often talked about. But you could also start to disaggregate that within sectors. So for example, tourism is often one that's talked about. You could look at tourism dependency on the ocean as well, but very much context specific, but ocean accounts gives you that underpinning data that can then talk to the different indicators that the country or area needs.
Fantastic. So I'm really happy to hear that it's context specific, and I think that's also a really welcome message in the region. We've seen a lot of tools that are designed outside the region, but don't necessarily apply to what we're doing. So seeing that it's modular, context specific, I think is super heartening. I don't think we have any more questions in the chat box, so I'm going to move to wrap up the webinar and give us back a little bit of time. Before I go into my messages of thanks, I just want to circle on some key takeaway messages for us from this webinar. Developing ocean accounts may seem like a challenging task. Hopefully it seems a little bit less challenging after today's webinar. But the most critical step, as we heard from the countries, is simply to start. Doing that governance framework, getting the people together in the same room actually is a significant amount of progress. And while the process will undoubtedly have some technical and data-related challenges and hurdles, starting these foundational pilots, whether it be a mangrove account or a coral reef or any other satellite account, allows a nation to build momentum and learn through practice and refine their systems over time. I think also a key takeaway message is that for our countries in the wider Caribbean region, whose economies, cultures, livelihoods, and I would also argue to some extent identity is closely linked to the sea, ocean accounts are not something that maybe we should do. It's a strategic necessity. You've heard multiple times today, you can't manage what you do not measure, and having robust data in a structured way is really the only way to ensure that our policy decisions effectively balance economic growth with conservation and development of marine natural capital. And as we said, ultimately what we want is healthy marine environments as a foundation of that wedding cake, the base for social and economic benefits. And then I think you would have also heard from the countries, but also from GOAP themselves. They serve as a dedicated partner, providing a global community of practice, standardized frameworks, but also hands-on support to guide nations through the complexities of ocean accounting and ensure their success. So with that, I'm going to move to closing remarks. And you guys who have been in the other webinars, I've been giving closing remarks in the other webinars, and there's only so much you can remix closing remarks. So I apologize if you've heard something similar to this already. But I'm really going to be a bit unorthodox in my order of thanks by first thanking the webinar participants, particularly country representatives, and we've seen interest in the chat box from them. Your interest in this work is reflective of a rising tide of momentum for the preservation of our invaluable blue or shared ocean. Of course, I would like to thank our presenters and speakers for their time and really valuable inputs and insights. By learning what other countries are doing in the region successfully, we can better understand the path on the map our countries and organizations would like to chart. And of course, with the detailed presentation from Jessica, we understand a little bit more, not only the what, but a bit of the how of how ocean accounts are compiled. So to Jessica Bridland, Adriana Greenidge, Robin Brown, Carlos Cordero Vega, Gabriela Encancara, thank you all so very much for your contributions and time today. I also would like to thank the generous funding provided by the Global Environmental Facility and the United Nations Development Program, which makes the Ocean Coordination Mechanism possible. I would like to thank our OCM Secretariat team in Cartagena, Colombia, who worked exceptionally hard on this series of webinars. Angelica, Jesus, Mariana, thank you so very much. And I also would like to thank Maria Cuartas, who I worked very closely with to organize this webinar. I want to highlight that this webinar series is on the road to our ocean. So it's not a destination, it's not a stopping point, it's just a port of call in our longer journey. It's really a springboard for the next actions we take. By coordinating our efforts and our actions, we can make better use of limited resources and reduce the risk of fragmentation of our efforts. Ultimately, we're seeking more sustainable outcomes for our marine spaces, but this requires resources. We know that the SDG 14 historically has been one of the most underfunded SDGs, and that financing gap, which is highlighted globally, can begin to be addressed through tools such as ocean accounts. So, with your presence and subsequent action on the road to our ocean and beyond, we want to take advantage of the following truth, which is that more voices mean more resources. And actually, really what we're trying to say is more coordinated voices mean more resources and more impact. I would like to invite you to participate in our final webinar of this series, Rising Political Action for Ocean Climate Action. As I said, that is co-hosted by the government of Brazil and the government of France. And I invite you to view our previous webinars by checking out the OCM website, which you'll see in the chat box. We had one, as I said, on 30 by 30, Sustainable Ocean Plans. Of course, we have the one today on ocean accounts. And then the next one, we'll be posting the video recordings from these. So if you missed anything, please find it there. The next part is particularly important. If your country would like to join the Ocean Pledge, please contact GOAP. And we also will be having a Caribbean-led side event at our Ocean Conference in collaboration with the government of Jamaica. And we believe this will be an excellent opportunity for your countries and your organizations to demonstrate on the global scale their commitment to action. We heard in our opening webinar from the head of the Our Ocean Secretariat about billions that have been mobilized through Our Ocean. Let's make sure that some of those resources flow to our region, and the initiatives that we highlighted through this webinar series are funded and fully mobilized. So with that, thank you again to our panelists and to you, our participants, for your participation. And we look forward to continuing this conversation on the road to Our Ocean and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alexander.
Bye. Thanks and bye.